Welcome to the Indy Drills podcast. It's a DB podcast. I'm Chad Wilson, owner of All Eyes DB Camp and author of our sponsor for the Indy Drills podcast, 101 DB Tips. If you've been coming here for a while and you have not yet picked up a copy of this book right here, 101 DB Tips, I guess at this point I should be offended. If you're a defensive back, you train defensive backs, coach defensive backs, you need a copy of this book. Over 100 of the best DB tips you will ever get. People are always looking for tips, right? How can I improve my press coverage, my off-man coverage, my zone coverage? What do I need to be watching on film? What's the best way to train in the offseason? How do I play nickel? How do I play safety? How do I play corner? Everything covered right here in this book. And you got two ways you can get it: soft cover or ebook delivered to you right away. Link in the description down below. All right. First time here, stick around. If you're here at the end, go ahead and give this video a like and subscribe. If you've been coming for a while and you've neglected to do that, hey, take a moment and do that right now. Let's get into it. What's on the table? We just finished the NFL draft. So, of course, I'm going to have my thoughts on that in this show. A great little subtopic here. How do I build a defensive back? And I'm talking about from the young ages up into the ages that we saw getting picked or not picked this weekend in the NFL draft. I will share some wisdom from experience on that there. I hate catch technique. That's a question that came into me. That's not me, folks. That's what someone brought to me. Our mailbag question is coming up. And also how you can use this NFL draft to develop your game as a defensive back. All of that coming up on the show today. All right, we're going to jump into this NFL draft. I would be remiss if I didn't give some of my thoughts on the biggest news story that there was in the NFL draft, which was Shedeur Sanders, a quarterback. We're not in the business of quarterbacks here on the Indy Drills podcast, which is kind of a lie because we like picking those guys off. We like figuring them out. We like reading them, and we like getting in their way and disrupting their flow. So to that end, that's what we deal with in quarterbacks here. But in terms of free agency, draft, evaluations, don't do that much here on the show. But I am going to have some thoughts on Shedeur Sanders and that whole saga, fiasco, however you want to look at it, coming up. But let's talk about DBs in this draft, specifically the first round. I'm not going to get into much past that. That will come as we go. I might start giving you guys some ideas of some guys that I think might surprise, might be able to stick, might do some things in this league. That's down the road. Here's what I've noticed. Here's what the facts are. If I count Travis Hunter, who was the second pick overall, then we had a draft where 4 defensive backs were taken in the first round. I'm not one to really even count Travis Hunter as a defensive back because let's be honest, if he was coming out of high school and he was getting recruited, his classification would not be defensive back. It would be athlete. We all know that. Next to his name as a prospect, as a recruit, it would say ATH for athlete. So you wouldn't even be listed on a Rivals or a 247 in the listings as the top defensive backs in the league. He wouldn't fall into that category. So when you look at it from that standpoint, this is the second year in a row that we've only had 3 defensive backs taken in the second round. Again, if we're not counting Travis, this is the second year where we had to get down to the 20s before a defensive back was taken. Last year, I believe Quinyon Mitchell was picked number 20. I might be wrong about that, but it was late. We passed 15. We were past that first half of the NFL draft before a defensive back was taken. This year, again, with Travis Hunter out, Jahdae Barron, past the middle part of the draft, gets picked up, and he's drafted by the Denver Broncos, which, by the way, I was a little surprised by that pickup. We've got the reigning defensive player of the year at one corner, Patrick Surtain. At the other corner, there's Riley Moss, someone that they've raved about, said that they liked, and I thought had a decent rookie season there, or was it a second season? A second season. Thought he did well there. They've got a couple of great guys on the inside, and P.J. Locke and Jaquan McMillan. So I'm, not sure what that pick was about. I guess we're going to see. But nevertheless, Jahdae Barron, first guy off of the books. Kid comes from Texas, goes to the Denver Broncos, and then we get Malachi Starks, and then they end it with Maxwell Hairston. And it's a trend for us to pay attention to, because in this last 3-year period, in 2023, we had 4 DBs taken in the first round. Last year, 3 DBs taken in the first round. This year, 4 or 3, whichever way you want to look at it, whether you want to count Travis Hunter or not, it's 4. This is over a 3-year stretch. This is the smallest amount of DBs, 10 in total, because, of how I'm counting it. 10 in total over a 3-year period is the smallest amount of DBs taken in the first round over any 3-year period over the last 10 years, dating back to 2016. So is this a long-term trend, a short-term trend? What might be fueling some of this? I think what might be fueling some of this is the rules, how we're seeing the games getting called, how teams are running defenses. There's a lot of quarters being played in the league right now, a lot of cover 4, that type of stuff, a lot of zone being played in this league. And that tends to get people to think, oh, defensive backs are less important if they're sitting back in the zone. If we're playing a bunch of man, then we really, really need defensive backs. And more teams are deciding to go the passive route and play a lot more zone because they don't want the penalties. They don't want the 50, 60-yard pass interference penalties down the field. And they've put more importance into guys in the trenches, more specifically the edge rushers, going in there and getting the sacks, because the rules have not changed so much for them. Yeah, it's easy to get a roughing the passer call, but that's a 15-yard penalty if you happen to get it. That pass interference penalty 50 yards down the field is a spot foul. And in response to that, I think a lot more teams have gone less man coverage, more into quarters. I think we're probably going to see a little bit more cover 2 coming into play here moving forward. And that is the tendency here is for a lot of teams to say, hey, the DBs are not as important. We could find a guy to do these things later on in the draft. These smart teams, the teams that are usually competing for it all, still prioritize defensive backs, the Kansas City Chiefs of the world. We saw the Buffalo Bills pick up a couple of DBs in their draft. Those kind of teams. The Philadelphia Eagles will still hold defensive back in high importance. The rest of the team, they're trend followers. All right, that's the tendency here. It's a copycat league. You've heard people say that. So they will follow the trends and they'll just be middle of the road, middle of the pack. That just drives me insane how teams are just so willing to do that. The copycats in this league don't really get it. It's the teams and the coaches and the programs that are the first ones to set a trend. All right. Those are the ones to go against the grain. Those are the ones that end up breaking through, doing things innovative. Because everyone else that's following the trend is just middle of the pack teams. Those are the 9 and 8s. Those are the 8 and 9s. Those are the 7 and 10, 10 and 7 wild card, and we're out of their teams. Okay, that's if you're going to be a trend follower, I think your ceiling is 10 and 7, and then there's no telling to where your bottom is. I just don't think you end up being the 14 and 3 team, the 15 and 2 team that goes into the playoffs, gets to a championship game for your conference, and ends up playing or winning a Super Bowl. That's just what I have observed in my 40 plus years of watching the National Football League. So this trend that we have going on where there's less than 5 or 6 DBs, which is kind of the standard of what we've seen in the past, being taken in that first round, we're going to see how that shakes out. I personally don't think that's going to continue because teams are just going to start suffering. They're going to realize that even if we're playing a bunch of zone, we do need guys that can make plays back there. Matter of fact, if you're going to be a big-time zone team, what you need out of that secondary are guys that can get their hands on the football and get the ball back to that side of the football that you love, which is the offensive side. If you're going to play zone and you've got a bunch of passive players that aren't playmakers, that just allow balls to be caught in front of them and come up and make tackles, well, your defense will be on the field all day. And then the better teams who are offensively patient and will go ahead and put together 10, 11, 12 play drives and score will just really drown you because your offense doesn't get the ball as much. You don't get as many opportunities, and you'll just lose games that way. So this little short-term trend that I see going on, I don't see it continuing. because the teams that are going to win, you're going to see, are the ones that still prioritize defensive back, because you've got to cover people in this league. It's a passing league. Okay, it's a passing league. With that said, defense and a running game is what ultimately gets teams the championship. All right. The one big major addition that the Philadelphia Eagles had this season was Saquon Barkley, a running back. Lo and behold, Super Bowl champions. You want to know what the next biggest addition the Philadelphia Eagles had this season? Defensive coordinator, Vic Fangio. Defense and a running game ultimately is still intact as a thing that's going to win you championships in this game, and the Philadelphia Eagles did do that. Speaking of the Philadelphia Eagles, I don't think they did defensive backs any favor, really, if you're looking at it from a large point of view, and all of the casual observers, which you have those in NFL positions, watch it and say, hey, you know, they just stayed in one or two coverages and then the defensive line ran in there and caused mayhem. Let's, as our team, go get a bunch of defensive linemen like the Philadelphia Eagles did, and we could just kind of put whoever we want back there in the secondary, mid-round picks, fringe free agents, and we could survive. You're going to find out that you're wrong, because the Philadelphia Eagles did not have fringe players in their secondary. That's all pro Darius Slay on one side, and that's arguably the best corner or defensive back in the last draft, Quinyon Mitchell, on the other side, and some playmakers at safety that allowed your defensive line to eat. So if you're of the mindset that I just need a defensive line and a pass rush and we can play a basic coverage back there and win and go far, whether you're at the NFL level or the college level or the high school level, and you just want to mimic what it is the world champions did, you're going to find out that you still need defensive backs that can play back there. So we're going to see, but I'm keeping an eye on this trend. 4 in 2023, 3 in 2024. And again, I'll say 3.5. So because Travis Hunter's half a defensive back, not in terms of his skill level, just he's a two-way player. So 3.5 here in 2025, just something for you guys to pay attention to. Who do I think out of those 4 guys? All right. Now I'm going to count Travis Hunter. I'm going to pull him in and take him out, and depending on what I'm discussing here. But who do I think out of those 4 guys is probably going to have the best rookie season or, you know, impact, or maybe even career? I would venture to say Malachi Starks. And I say that because I've always said this on this show. So if you've been listening to me, get ready to hear this again. It matters where you go. It matters what organization you go to. Some organizations just seem to be able to do a really good job of picking a player that meets what their standard is, what it is they like to do, B, developing the player and getting the most out of them. And for quite some time now, that has been the Baltimore Ravens. So on that, it's just like whoever those Ravens decide to plug in right there, they just seem to do well. That happens to be Malachi Starks. Another thing is certain teams just have a knack for picking guys at a certain position and doing well with it. We've seen what the Green Bay Packers have been able to do for decades now at their quarterback position. They went from Favre to Rodgers and now Love. They just seem to know what to do at that position. All right. And we could say that about several other teams at other positions here. The Ravens have done well in terms of picking defensive backs, developing defensive backs, and playing a system for that defensive back that happens to work for them. So that's another thing working in Malachi Starks' behavior. And then the final thing is this player is a high IQ player. He's a player with that it factor. We've been seeing that since his freshman year out on this college football field. And you take that and you add it to the factors that I've just said before. And I would say, at least in my opinion, Malachi Starks would be your front runner there in terms of who's going to probably have the best rookie season out of those 4 guys that got picked in the first round. Travis Hunter, obviously, probably the most elite talent out of those guys right there, but I'm still up in the air as to just how well he's going to be able to do as a rookie defensive back, if he's going to be splitting reps and meeting time on offense. I don't care how talented you are. This league is difficult for defensive backs. I don't think you can part-time anything and line up in front of Jamar Chase or Justin Jefferson or yeah, I could name a lineup in front of an Adam Thielen when you think you can relax this week and not have a rough time. So I think Travis Hunter is going to have to put the time in as a defensive back. It would be nice if the Jaguars decided that they wanted to go the route of really getting him to the point of nailing things down and getting comfortable as a DB before he started dabbling on offense. But the player doesn't want that, and I don't think that's why the Jaguars picked him. I have this feeling that they are going to work him more on offense in the early going and just kind of see if they could throw him out there as an athlete on defense. And I just don't think that that kind of thing is going to work. There's no denying the talent of the other two players I haven't mentioned in this discussion, Jahdae Barron, as well as Maxwell Hairston, who's one of the fastest guys in the draft. It's just that remains to be seen. For Jahdae Barron, I'm not sure how he's even going to be used in Denver, as I discussed before. Where does he fit in? Is he an outside guy? Is he an inside guy? How much playing time does he get there? Because there are other great players in Denver that he has to work through, and I'm not sure how they work that around. And then Maxwell Hairston, I feel is maybe a little bit more raw. I think had he not run a 4.2, he probably would not have been a first-round defensive back. And, the Buffalo Bills, I'm just not sure what their plan is, their defensive back. A few years ago, they drafted Kaiir Elam, first-round pick, and they just did a poor job of managing his career and developing him as a player. And so they get dinged for that for me. Now, they did get a Christian Benford later on in that very same draft, and he turned into something. So, that kind of balances it out. But I'm not sure that they are really in the business of player development as it comes to defensive back. Maybe they'll make a liar out of me. Maybe I'm being a little bit harsh there. But if you're telling me Buffalo Bills versus Baltimore Ravens in terms of developing a defensive back, I'm going Baltimore Ravens all day. And so those are my reasons for having Malachi Starks at the top of this thing in terms of who do I think out of those four guys is going to have the best rookie season as a defensive back. Now on to the story that dominated the 3 days of coverage in the NFL draft, and that is Shedeur Sanders. We all have our theories about what happened there. I think ultimately, as I've been kicking this around in my head, like many of us have over this 3-day period, is that I think there's a little bit of everything in there. When you got to go back and forth so much on an issue as to who was at fault or what happened, at the end of the day, usually that means there's a little bit of fault on both sides. My thought about it is this. I totally understand what Deion Sanders was trying to do for his son. And it's not something that hasn't been done before. If you're new to this game, you're super young, then you know that Eli Manning did the same thing. His father, Archie Manning, while not outspoken like a Deion Sanders, behind closed doors, was very forceful in trying to get the draft to go the way that he wanted it to go for his youngest son, Eli Manning, as he was coming out of Ole Miss. He had watched kind of the history of the San Diego Chargers at the time. That's where they were, and how things have gone for players there, how things have gone for quarterbacks there, the ownership. And in this position of leverage, he exercised that leverage and forced San Diego's hand. The idea was that we don't want you drafting Eli Manning. That is literally the words and the message that was put out there prior to the draft. They literally pointed out to the team that had the number one pick overall, the San Diego Chargers, and said, we don't want you drafting him. It was that bold. If you guys think Deion Sanders had been bold in some of his thoughts, the things that he said, whatever, maybe because we're in a social media era, it just was everywhere, so it seemed overwhelming to you. But his message, bold as it might have been, was not as bold as what Team Manning was saying going into the draft. San Diego, do not draft this. Do not draft my son. That was a message, though it wasn't trumpeted everywhere like we can do now. Nevertheless, the Chargers called their bluff, drafted Eli Manning. He was interviewed about the Chargers potentially drafting him right at the draft, and he reiterated those comments. He did go the class act route. He was drafted, walked up on stage, hugged Pete Rozelle, who was the commissioner at the time, posed with the San Diego Chargers jersey. I wonder where that jersey is now. A number 1 San Diego Chargers jersey that Eli Manning posed with for the picture, for the photo op. But nevertheless, soon thereafter, the pick was traded. And as we all know, Eli Manning ended up with the New York Giants and won a couple of Super Bowls. Prior to that, a guy by the name of John Elway, who was highly regarded as being the number 1 pick overall coming out of Stanford. He was everything that you wanted. A great athlete, can run around with the football if he needed to. Great. Was drafted to play baseball and had an absolute hand cannon. This is what you were looking for in a quarterback back in those days. And he was like the complete consensus number 1 pick overall. Pretty much said, Baltimore Colts, I'm not coming to you. If you draft me, I'm not playing there. And John had a, coach for a dad, Jack Elway. And, they forced the hands. Didn't end up a Colt, ended up a Denver Bronco. Guess what? 2-time world champion. So you can't fault Deion Sanders for seeing that happen with these 2 guys. Seeing what they did, seeing how it resulted in the player ending up on the team that he wanted to be on, or at the very least, not being on the team that he didn't want to play for. And then the ultimate result in their career was 2-time world champions for both of them. Hall of Fame for John Elway, and probably a Hall of Fame for Eli Manning. You cannot fault Deion Sanders for seeing that and saying, hey, I think we have some leverage here, both me as a former player and me as my son, being in a Heisman Trophy race, getting a lot of attention for turning things around at Colorado and trying to move in that same way. If you just cut everything else out, even if you're a guy that hates Deion, his confidence and how he talks, you don't like his swag, you're more of a humble person, you don't like any of those things about him, if you can just cut that out of your thought process right now and look at it exactly the way that I just pointed it out to you, you can't fault Deion Sanders for going the route that he did. Here's where you can kind of fault Deion. Maybe he was wrong about his evaluation of his son, Shedeur Sanders. Maybe you can say, hey, listen, you overplayed your hand on this. Your son was not in the same position evaluation-wise, projection-wise, as Eli Manning was, as John Elway was. Like John Elway was consensus number 1 overall. There wasn't really, he came in a really great draft with Jim Kelly, who ended up being a 4-time Super Bowl participant and a Hall of Famer, and Dan Marino, who went way later in the draft, 24, but an all-time great. Many consider him the best thrower of the football ever, but many considered John Elway to be the number 1 overall. So coming into this draft, it was in the beginning Cam Ward or Shedeur Sanders, and then it's just really started to become more Cam Ward. And Deion maybe overplayed his hand because there were a lot of guys in that group, and Shedeur was not standing above the group like John Elway was not standing above the group like Eli Manning was. The only real competition at quarterback for that number 1 spot for Eli Manning was Phillip Rivers, who, ended up becoming a great player and who did end up being the guy that went to the Chargers. But the idea was not only for Eli Manning that the top 2 teams needed a quarterback. So that worked a little better. And I just don't know that either A, Deion really thought this through, or B, if the way things started to fall into place as we got closer to the draft, where it was just one team at this top that was going to get a quarterback, and, the Giants needed a quarterback, and were they really, really going to get a quarterback this year? Or were a bunch of these teams going to sit here and wait for what looks to be a better crop in its entirety of quarterbacks coming the next year? I don't know if that was carefully thought out. And so an error was made there. Hand was overplayed, and it opened up the door for all of the criticisms that the Sanders family, and Deion in particular, got as the draft wore on, and what he will continue to get as this thing goes on, which was, stuff like okay, Shedeur was a little too cocky, maybe put some things in Shedeur's head, whether directly or through just watching how he was, Deion was talking to others about Shedeur. Maybe he got the wrong things in his head and didn't play this right in interviews, both the ones that he had with teams and then in the press conferences at the combine, which was analyzed and analyzed again. Or, teams just didn't want to deal potentially with a Deion Sanders. I'm not so sure about that because I would, if I think about what has happened in the past, if you're an NFL team or if you're the NFL in total and you would be inclined to be afraid of someone's dad, you would have been afraid of Archie Manning. All right, you'd be afraid of a guy who doesn't say much to the public, but seems to be wielding a whole lot of power in the background to make things happen. I'd be a little more fearful of that guy. I'd be a little bit more wanting to maybe not deal with this. I don't need someone controlling my football team. And this guy seems to have a lot of power and mysteriously seems to have a lot of power. Maybe I don't want to deal with that. Not only did they want to deal with it, the Chargers dealt with it when they were told not to deal with it. That's how much they ran to this potential problem. And then we had all these teams run away. So that's going to be the mystery that goes on forever. A lot of people think they know what's going on in NFL front offices, and then you'd be desperately wrong. Sometimes you have higher expectations for how things operate in NFL front offices than you need to have. Sometimes it's a shit show. I mean, for lack of a better term, excuse me there, but sometimes it could be more of a mess than you think it is. So ultimately, I don't know what happened there. Here's where things lie, though. Shedeur Sanders is going to the Cleveland Browns. The vibe I got just watching and listening and reading some things afterwards is that not everyone in that building in the executive positions or in the decision-making positions wanted that to happen. Yes, I heard what Kevin Stefanski said about, how they looked on camera at the moment that Shedeur was selected. I'm not sure if I'm buying that. And as I sit here and think about and I read some things and try to analyze it, I think somebody there pushed a button and forced that to happen. I'm here to tell you that that's never really good for the player coming in. You really do need, especially when you're a late round pick, to have a consensus there that this is the thing that we needed to do. If it was the owner that pushed it, then the general manager is going to be a bit, for lack of a better term, standoffish about it. And if the head coach didn't want it, the head coach hands out the reps. The head coach is really in charge of the way things move on that field, and he can kind of paint the picture. All right, head coach can kind of paint the picture of, look, told you, this guy's not that good, not what we need, not what we want. If the head coach was really on board with Dillon Gabriel and feels good about his evaluation there and wants to be right about it, how much is he going to let Shedeur Sanders compete with the Dillon Gabriel? What about the scouts in the building that said, yes, Dillon Gabriel over Shedeur Sanders? And they're in those meetings and they're talking now. How do they feel? All right. I'll say this, Cleveland Browns never short on drama. Yeah, you know what? They don't seem to be able to get to conference championship games. They can't get into this NFL Super Bowl thing that they keep having at the end of the year. They never seem to be able to do that, and they have a hard time being over 500. But if they do one thing, is they know how to get the league fans and anyone else observing to talk about the Cleveland Browns. There is no sub 500 team that gets talked about more than the Cleveland Browns, and it's because they do stuff like sign Deshaun Watson to a fully guaranteed contract. They drafted Johnny Manziel, or they hop on and say, hey, all the flames surrounding this one player, Shedeur Sanders, we don't care, bring him on board. I'm just really interested in seeing how things get done there. I'm a little fearful for Shedeur Sanders because personally, I'm going to give you my personal opinion. I feel he's better than where he got drafted. That I think he was a first-round draft pick as I compare him to other quarterbacks that have been taken both throughout history and in recent history. No, I would say that almost about every quarterback taken in this first round, except maybe a Cam Ward. I don't think any of these guys in a more competitive quarterback draft end up in the first round. So let me just establish that. This is not just the Shedeur Sanders thing. But do I think he's a fifth round quarterback? No. Do I think he's a fourth round quarterback? No. Thought Shedeur Sanders is a second round, third round quarterback, should not have been available here in this last day of the draft. So we can go on and have all our theories about why this happened, what should have happened there. We can do that till the cows come home. What does matter now is Shedeur Sanders is a Cleveland Brown. He's going to have to go over there and show not only the Browns, but the world that they made a mistake. Oh, while there may be a little bit of politics in his way there. So the drama on this thing does not end here. We need to see how this training camp and these preseason games go. And right now, on that roster, here's what the Cleveland Browns have on that roster right now at quarterback. Deshaun Watson, who I personally believe will never take another snap as a Cleveland Brown. You have Kenny Pickett, who was a first-round pick for the Pittsburgh Steelers, ends up in Philadelphia. Now he's a Cleveland Brown, third team in 3 years. Joe Flacco, who's kind of been a semi-savior for a couple of programs, organizations over the last few years, making them look respectable, but not quite getting them over the hump. He's probably your front runner to start before we headed into this draft this weekend. Dylan Gabriel, who was the first quarterback that the Browns took in this draft, and then the mentioned Shedeur Sanders. That's 5 guys. Not 5 guys on a roster at quarterback in this league. So some guys are going to have to get cut. You guys tell me down in the comment section who you think's getting cut off this roster. We already know the implications financially for the Cleveland Browns if they cut Deshaun Watson. All right, so if that guy's gone, who do you trust out of the next 4 to line up and take snaps for you the first game or for the first 4, 5, 6 games of the season? Out of those 4 guys that I named, whatever guy you named there is obviously the one that's for sure going to make the roster. Then who's your backup? And then what do you do with that third and fourth guy? All right, I think you keep 3 guys on the roster, max. So that means someone's getting cut. And then who's the guy that's just the emergency practice squad guy? Who do you think that's going to be? Drop your comment down below. I would love to hear that. If you're listening to this on Spotify or Anchor or Apple Podcast, go ahead and drop your comment there. You can ask it in the form of the question. Would love to hear you guys on that. Moving on to the next topic here. Listen, this was the NFL draft. I like to, since that's the major thing that we've had come around, I want to kind of center things around that because this is what's on people's minds. So if you're a young dad out there or even a young player out there, thinking about the future, you would like to be a, future NFL football player, or you're a dad thinking your son might have that kind of talent and looks like he does have the potential to be an NFL defensive back in the future. I'm going to share a little bit of wisdom through experience here for you. This is not the gospel, but again, it's through experience. And so, I've reached an age where I can throw some of those things out there to you. Here's what I've observed both in person and just as a guy who's watched the draft with a careful analytical eye for, many, many years now. If you're out there and you got a young defensive back, let's say you're a middle school kid or you're just entering into middle school, or even you got an elementary school kid, which I'm here to tell you right now, all of you dads, if your kid's in elementary school, you have no idea what he's going to be, okay? You got no clue. Yes, it's cool. It's your kid. You're going to think the best. You're going to think the world, whatever. But in the reality, you have no idea, okay? I used to tell parents this when I was coaching Little League football. You don't know what you have until your kid starts getting a mustache and he finds out what girls are, all right? Until then, you don't know anything. So pretty much what I'm saying is you got to see how your kid gets through puberty. Is he going to be of size, of skill level? And then can he avoid the distraction that comes with having girls' attention from females? Those are the 2 biggest impediments to a kid's future as an athlete. when they start getting into those years of possible recruitment. Outside of that, though, if you're looking towards the future, if you've got a really young kid here, here's what I have noticed. You, in those early years, have got to try your best to make your kid the best athlete that he can be. How do you do that? It's not by having your kid play an entire fall football season, give him a week off for Christmas to unwrap some gifts, and then immediately get him training for the next football season like he's already in the NFL. That means putting a sled on his back, having him go to a trainer and do position-specific drills. That's not going to get it done. Yes, your kid's going to be really good as an 8, 9U, 10U, 11U player. You'll be able to sit in the stands or maybe on the sidelines as a coach and be really, really proud of your 11-year-old son who scored his third or fourth touchdown or got 2 picks once again in the game, and you can feel really, really proud and have people tell you your son's going to grow up to be the next Pat Surtain, or he's going to grow up to be the next Champ Bailey, Darrelle Revis, Deion Sanders. They'll tell you that about your 11-year-old. Here's what I've noticed happens. That kid becomes 12, 13, 14 years old. And he's not that great of an athlete because the only thing he did was football. So he's got a really nice back pedal for a 14-year-old. And he can flip his hips for a 14-year-old. And he can kind of play a coverage better than other guys for a 14-year-old. But not that great of an athlete. That's going to start to become a problem. And then I've watched dads who have ignored that advice or maybe didn't get it, and they did what it is I said dads will do, which make your kid a 24/7, 12 months out of the year football player, and they get there and realize, my kid's not that fast. He's skillful, but he's not that fast. He doesn't jump that well either. This change of direction's kind of okay. All right, I mean, he does the drills better than everyone else, but as an athlete, doesn't really stack up. Let's try and make him an athlete now. Oh, I'm sorry, man. It's too late. He's going to be behind and probably will stay behind as he goes through high school. He's climbing a tall mountain as he goes up against kids who've been building their athleticism since 6, 7 years old. This is how this thing works. Make the athlete first, then get into sharpening his position-specific skills later. This is like the bodybuilder that is getting ready for the competition next year. In the fall, he bulks up. He makes himself as big as possible. He puts all the Hulk on. And then as he starts moving closer and closer towards the contest, he'll start cutting into that bulk. So now we get some definition, right? The big shoulders now turn into well-rounded shoulders. The big biceps now turn into a bicep where you could see all 3 of the muscles in the arm, the tricep, the bicep, the middle of the bicep. He bulks, then he cuts. This is what you're doing with your athlete. Make him an athlete. Put him in basketball. Put him in track. Put him in baseball. Put him in soccer. Put him in lacrosse. Put him in all those things. Then as he gets closer and you have a better idea of what he's actually going to be, the kid you think that's a DB at 8 could be a linebacker when he's 15. The kid you think that's a safety at 9 years old could end up being a defensive lineman at age 15, 16. You thought your kid was going to be a shutdown corner, but you know what? Turns out he's going to be a nice wide receiver. So then what about all those DB drills that he's been doing? What are those even for now as he's playing defensive end? Kind of for naught. Young parents, young players, hear me on this. So I watch this draft and I see guys that were really good players, but they go to the combine and they do their pro days and they just don't stack up numbers wise. And they feel the pain now because somewhere along the way they skipped a step and didn't do things the right way. And now I had all this production in college and now I'm not hearing my name called, or I've slid way down off the draft, or I'm just not even going to get a pro opportunity because I lacked the athleticism to get that opportunity. It's a very bad thing. And you have now at this point, I don't want to put it to you this way, but there really isn't any other way to put it. Hey, you made some bad moves there as a parent. You made some bad moves there as a young player way back in the day. Put your kid in track, man. Put your kid in track. If that's what the league wants to see, if they want to see 4 3s and 4 4s, You got to start getting that ready now. Here's the other thing about putting your kid in all these other different sports. Two things. A, it exposes them to different types of kids that play in all these other things and all of these other sports, different coaches. All right. You do your son a disservice if he saw a football coach all through the fall, then he's doing football training with that same coach in the spring, and then he's got that same football coach again. He never got anything different. He's around those same players all the time. Or he goes to a trainer and it's him and the trainer one-on-one, or it's him in a really small group, him and two other guys. Does he ever really learn how to be a teammate? He needs to be exposed to different coaching, different players, and then he also needs to learn how to be a teammate. Then the other thing is different skills get developed as you play these other sports. An outfielder in baseball really learns how to track a ball, which is going to be great skills for him as a defensive back if that's what he ends up being down the road. Being able to run down a ball in the outfield, hit off of an aluminum bat at high speeds, makes catching a punt or a deep thrown post route that much easier. Being able to cross over and drive to the basket in basketball makes that kid so much quicker in change of direction. Or being able to defend a guy who can cross over someone on the basketball court and drive to the basket is going to make him that much better covering a wide receiver. He's developing those skills because those skills are absolutely needed to survive on a basketball court. Now, because they have been so honed and developed because they were essential in that sport, and now he brings them over to football, it's just real easy. He's going to seem like a natural doing it, even though he hasn't been doing a bunch of DB drills up to this point. Because he played basketball for however many years as a youth, he comes over and he picks up the drills kind of fast when he gets to high school and he starts doing specific DB training. It's just kind of what happens. Oh, suddenly he's a real natural at tracking the football because he played in the outfield in baseball. Or he just really looks good running down the field with a wide receiver on a fade route or a post route, or running down a running back that's broken loose because he ran 400 meter after 400 meter, 200 meter after 200 meter, a bunch of 100-meter races where it was him and 7 other kids in a lane really fighting for their pride as a gun got popped off, and it was really just based on running. He did all the workouts, got his legs strong, and then on Saturday afternoon, he had to prove himself mano a mano against 7 other people in a track meet, and he developed his speed to the utmost doing that. Now he brings that skill to the football field as a defensive back, if that's what he's going to be at age 15, and he's a natural runner. Don't be that dad that makes your kid a 24/7, 365 days a year football player when he's a youth. Don't do it to him. Yes, the youth football coach might scare you and say, hey, if he's not here during the offseason, might have a hard time starting when the season comes. Okay. Maybe. Your son doesn't need to be a star 11U player. I'm here to tell you, he doesn't need to be that. He needs to experience some difficulty as an 11U player, maybe not starting. Maybe not being the guy. Maybe there are several other guys that are better than you. He needs to feel that sting as he moves into puberty. So if the coach wants to, sideline him and not highlight him because he didn't do the off-season program, which sounds crazy to me for a kid that's in a youth football situation. He needs to do the off-season program because this youth football coach thinks he's somehow Mike Tomlin. He has tricked himself into thinking he is the leader of a professional organization and the kids need to go through the off-season program. No, man, that kid needs to play another sport and he needs to ride his bike and he needs to do other kid things. He's a kid. So maybe you guys can feel the passion that I've had in here. I've told people this and maybe they think I'm lying or maybe they think I misremember. I promise you I didn't misremember. I had 2 sons that got drafted and none of them were doing DB drills at 9, 10 years old. They did what they did in practice because they would occasionally play defensive back. All right, both of my sons played quarterback. One was a utility, played quarterback, played linebacker, played running back, played everything. So he's part-time, just did a little bit of everything. If you think I had them out on the field on a Wednesday night at 7 p.m. backpedaling, pressing, flipping their hips, you'd be so far from that. Neither one of them became full-time defensive backs until they got to high school. And I didn't start doing training with them with my older son, who was drafted in the second round, I think until his sophomore year. Now, maybe I don't recommend you wait that long now, but I didn't start doing DB drills with them until they got to high school. They ran track, they played basketball, they played baseball, which is the sport I really, really was trying to push them into. They did taekwondo, they did a whole bunch of other stuff. I wanted them to be great athletes. Not only that, we didn't say you're going to be a football player. You're going to go in all these other sports, and then whatever happens, happens. If you end up being a really good baseball player, or you end up being a really good basketball player, or if you look like you can be some kind of a judo taekwondo champion, we will push you in that direction. That's the gifts God gave you. That's where you seem to have the passion and the talent, and we would move there. I'm not going to cry that you're not a football player. It doesn't matter to me. It's whatever you are good at. So that was the number one thing. And the second thing was, hey, we're going to make you a really good athlete. And to be honest, the only thing we really pushed our kids, forced our kids to do was run track. Track is going to make you better at all these other sports you decide to run. And you guys just aren't going to run up and down our house all day. You want to run? We're going to run around a track. And that's the only thing we really forced them to do. Everything else, man, they chose to do those things. So you build an athlete first, then you turn them into this highly skilled, specific position player later. Those leading up to the adolescent years, 13 years old, you need to build an athlete. That's why I won't train kids prior to the age of 13. A lot of times they don't even understand or care about these drills that I'm doing with them. It just doesn't compute. They'd rather be doing something else. And then I'll get some dads that be like, oh no, he loves it. Yeah, he loves it. No, dad, he doesn't love it. You might be seeing this wrong, or he just loves it because he sees you love it and he's forcing himself at age 9 or 10 to be doing these drills out here in the field with me. They're just not into it like that. Let them go chase a ball somewhere, or, go do something else. When they get to high school, this stuff is going to get real. All right. So that's my message on how you build a defensive back. And that track background, if you could get that for them, is super, super important. If they play so many other sports and they're so good at some of these other sports that they don't have time for track, well, you know what? They'll build up some speed doing all these other sports. They'll get speed out of that. All right. But they need to be fast. They need to be able to jump. They need to be able to change direction. These are the things that are going to get evaluated on at a combine, at a pro day, or when they start having to do these workouts for teams, they're going to need to be able to have some speed and jump. That's athleticism. They're going to need to have that, and they develop that early on playing a bunch of sports. The specific skill stuff they will get in high school by going to trainers or having great coaches, and in college by having a good program that develops them. They'll get those things. You can kind of wait for them. All right, on to the next thing here. Mailbag question. Love the mailbag question. We're digging into the mailbag this week. And I've got a really, really good question. I know a lot of guys think this way, and I appreciate Michael in South Carolina asking this question. Here's what it is. My coach wants me to use catch technique, but I hate it. I never feel comfortable using it. Can you give me some pointers? Michael in South Carolina. Before I get to answering Michael's question, if you have a DB question that you would like to get answered, there's two ways you can get that done. The best way to do that is to ask that question in the comment section down below as you are listening to this podcast. All right. If you're watching it on YouTube, hit the comment section down below. If you're listening to it on a streaming device, Apple, Spotify, whatever the case may be, ask the question there. You can post a question on most of these streaming devices. You can ask your question there. Outside of that, if you're having trouble being able to do that, you can send me an email to cwilson@alleyedsdbcamp.com. Again, at cwilson@alleyedsdbcamp.com. I will answer your question. One of these questions will get picked and read out on the next Indy Drills podcast. So let's get to Michael's question. He's in South Carolina, hates catch technique, doesn't feel comfortable using it. Well, a couple of things I will say beforehand for you, Michael, is number one, if your coach is hell-bent on using that catch technique, it is in your best interest to put in the time, the effort, and the hours to learn how to do it, because chances are you probably won't get on that field or get the amount of playing time that you think you deserve if you don't get that technique down. Coach is king, coach is in charge, coach is going to get what he wants, or you will not play. So I get that you hate it. Trick yourself into loving it. I'm going to give you a little bit of a story. I played college football originally at a place called Long Beach State. They don't have football anymore, but all we did at Long Beach State was play press man 100% of the time, just about. I might be wrong about that. Not as much. It just seemed like we were always in press. So that means I'm a yard or 2 yards off of a wide receiver and I'm pressing him. I left Long Beach State when the program closed down. I go to the University of Miami. What are we doing? We are playing cover two, and that means catch technique each and every down just about. That's all we did in practice. That's what we did in games. And that means I'm now 5 yards off of a wide receiver who comes off the ball full speed. And mind you, these were some of the best athletes in the world coming off of the ball. And I've got to figure out a way to stay in front of them and play this catch technique from 5 yards off, where I just spent the last 2 years being right up in a receiver's face and playing it. When I tell you I had a really hard time adjusting to that technique, I had a really hard time adjusting to that technique. And you know what? I hated it. I could not understand why you don't just let me walk up there and do what it is that I have been doing really well, by the way, so well that you guys scholarshiped me from Long Beach State to this place and let me do that. Couldn't understand it. And I hated it. But I also knew that I'm at the University of Miami. I went from what was arguably the worst football program in college football to the best program in college football. And there's no way I was going to dictate to this team who had just come off of winning a national championship what my technique was going to be. I didn't have that kind of leverage. I don't think anyone did. But I certainly did. So I either learned how to play that catch technique, or you know what? I would just be a spectator and I would just watch games. So you know what I did, Michael? I put the time in and I learned and I kept learning and I kept failing and I kept fixing it and I kept watching film and I kept trying to find what's the key to this, kept trying to listen to the coach and try to get this done. I would recommend that you take that route with this. Hopefully your coach is really good at explaining it and you try to pick up as much as you can. Get the hate part out of it and you try to learn as much as you can, both from what he is saying and that from what you see other players doing, both in practice and maybe some of the games. There've got to be guys on your team that are good at this technique. Otherwise, I don't think your team would be playing it. Coaches, some can be insane, but not that insane. You're just not going to willfully continue doing something over and over that's just going to get you cleaned up. So you got some guys on the team that are good at this. Combine what the coach is saying to what you see those players doing to figure out how you are going to be able to be good at this technique. Without digging into the absolute ins and outs of how catch technique works and all of the details of it, I go in depth about those things in the All Eyes DB Camp members area. There's a link down in the description down below. I highly recommend it to you and any other parents and players and coaches that are watching this show. Join the All Eyes DB Camp members area because I have details on all kinds of things like this. So I'm not going to jump into those details here. Only to just point out this, your eyes are going to be super important. That was one of the big things that I learned in this. When a guy's 5 yards off of you, it gets a little bit more difficult for you to keep your eyes locked in the place that they need to be locked in because now you've got a bigger view pulled away from the player who's 5 yards away now. Your eyes will have this tendency to see a whole lot more than it did when you were right up in front of that player. So I had to learn how to narrow my focus from a distance. From a distance, learn how to cut the player's torso off. You're not seeing the upper part of the player. You're not seeing his jersey, helmet, all that. You've got to really direct your eyes small. You've got to have like tunnel vision on the player's hips, or really just pick a near hip. So if you are outside leverage, stare at his near hip. If he has a logo on his pants, stare at that as he approaches you. All right. Outside of that, though, you've got to learn how to have good lateral movement and stay patient and not want to open up as that player gets close to you. He's running full speed. You're going to feel like you need to open so you cannot have him blow past you. Get that out of your head. But the biggest thing I will tell you is get your vision focused, narrow focus. Start there. All right. The next time you go do this, if you do nothing else, train your eyes to do that. Have a really small focus. Cut the player's torso off. When you get really good at this, you will not even know who you're covering. All you're seeing is just the hips of a guy. Maybe that's even better because sometimes you get nervous when a certain player walks out there in front of you. If he's a known really good receiver and you see who it is, you might get a little bit frazzled because of the reputation of the player. Man, get to a point where you just see that guy's hip. You don't even see the jersey number, the helmet. You don't even know who it is. You just see a hip. I'm tracking that hip, and then I'm going to make that jam. For coaches that are out here, if you're trying to get your players to use catch technique, I would say a little tip or trick for you on this is don't just use the catch technique in man coverage. Find ways to use that catch technique in zone coverage. The reason I say that is this. There's less pressure in zone. So if you can teach your guys to use catch technique and try to disrupt a player's route in a zone, and then after he gets the jam on the player, he buzzes to whatever zone or whatever it matches up on another player, however you guys play your zone, if you can get your players into a less pressurized situation where they can use catch technique, they'll get comfortable using it. And then now as they have to start using it in man coverage, they tend to get a little bit better using it because they've had a couple situations where they were less pressurized and they were able to have success in accomplishing their goals in that zone coverage. And now it gets easier for them to move into the man coverage using the technique. So try to mix zone coverage and man coverage use of catch technique. Also, you might want to, if you can't use it in zone, introduce it down in the goal line area where there's not so much space behind the player, get them comfortable using it there where there is a end line back there and they're just not so exposed in the beginning. This is in the initial stages of teaching the players how to use it and getting them to use it. Then you can kind of move out to the middle of the field and explain to them the same things you did when you were down on that goal line, you're going to do here. Just stop forgetting about how much space there is back there. You do have a post safety if you have one, or the ball needs to come out faster if you're trying to play this in cover zero because, hey, we are going to, on the defensive side, bring 6 players when they're blocking with 5 or bring 7 players when they're blocking with 6. All right. Understand that they don't have to be in it as long. Okay. Just a little tip out there for you coaches. But again, I recommend to the coaches, players, and parents, become a member of that All Eyes DB Camp members area. Yes, I understand. I'm selling you something here, but I'm selling you something that I'm extremely passionate about. There is a lot of, there's a whole lot of knowledge that has gone into this, both as a player, as a coach, and all of those things that has gone into this members area. Now I'm feeding that back to you and putting it to you in a way that you will be able to understand, because I've been through this whole process where I've learned, I've tried to teach something, wasn't successful, and then figured out a way to teach it. And so you've got all that. So, between the book and the members area, you guys are going to be big winners. And now on to our final segment. Again, the NFL draft just passed this weekend, and staying in that theme, I'm going to tell you guys watching this, and this is especially for maybe your high school guys. Kudos to you if you're younger than a high school age kid tuning into this, watching in and locking in and paying attention to this. But for you high school and college guys, I'm going to tell you guys how you can use what you see in this NFL draft that just passed and NFL drafts that come in the future to tailor your game. Hopefully you watched the NFL draft. It's in your best interest to watch this whole process. You guys need to watch the combine, watch the drills that these guys go through, and just all of the stuff that they do in the process. Watch the interviews. Just listen to some of the things that the guys say, how they conduct themselves, and then what the result of those interviews and things looks like down the road in terms of how successful they are. Just take some observations from that. Watch what these, analysts say and what you hear about these players in terms of their traits, skills, and all of that, what makes them a draftable player or what makes them a first round player. Pay attention to those things. And as you do that, I just want to highlight some of those things that maybe you may have missed, or some things for you to pay attention to coming down the road as you continue to watch the draft. You hear analysts talk about the draft, and drafts come down in the future. Each year there's a draft. Pay attention to the things that are being said, the trends that are going on, and now you start adapting your play to those things, because that's A, what's going to make you a better player that helps your team win, and B, it's going to make you a draftable player when you end up in that situation. The first thing I will say is that technique matters more than hype, as you will find. Okay, there may have been guys that were highly talked about coming into this senior season, guys that may have been highly talked about leading up to this draft, and then maybe you didn't hear their name called, or they didn't go as high as you thought. Guys who know how to play the position are at a premium. That's still a thing. Now, I know I talked about becoming a great athlete. Yes, that is evaluated. But each and every year, the media will make that more important than anything else, what a guy's 40 time was. They're trying to get you to believe that the guy's 40 time nullifies everything else that goes on. I'm here to tell you, it's still a very technical position, defensive back. Whether you're a safety or a corner or a nickel back, you still have to have your technique down. So yes, in your early years, make yourself an athlete, because you just need to have that to qualify. But once you've qualified, you have to be good at the position, and you have to have good technique. If you're a corner, have your press technique down. Be able to pedal, be able to flip your hips, be able to come out of your back pedal. You get tested on all of these things. Not only do you need to perform those things in the test, you need to be able to show those things on film. So your technique is going to matter more than any hype, because sometimes a player gets hyped for one reason or another. Never let any of that stuff go to your head. At the end of the day, you've got to be able to play the position. You got to have some technique. So focus on your technique. When all is said and done, whether you get drafted in that first round or that fourth or that fifth round, whatever the case may be, wherever the chips fall for you on those 3 days at the end of April into May, you are going to need to have good technique to survive and thrive at this very high level. There's very little room for error, and technique allows you to eliminate error. So technique matters more than hype. The next thing that I'm going to talk about, and it's probably the thing that will filter into almost everything that you hear me talk about on this channel, on all of these Indy Drills podcasts, and anytime you see me talking about DB play. Football IQ matters. You cannot be a dummy on the football field. You will only be able to get by on your height, your size, your weight, your speed for so long. And as you start to enter into this highest level, if you don't have a football IQ, you will not last very long. Name a big-time DB. Name a Hall of Fame DB. Throw his name out there. Rod Woodson, Charles Woodson, Deion Sanders, Champ Bailey, Darrell Revis, Ronnie Lott, Darrell Green. Name any of those greats, and I'm here to tell you they have a high football IQ. They had it when they played. They have it now. They had it coming in. They know how things work. They understand coverages. They know how offenses attack, period. If you're not putting in the time to study that, start doing it now, or your dreams are going to get cut off. Someone's going to put out the lights on your NFL dreams, or you'll be one of these guys trying to hear your name called for the NFL draft and you don't hear it called. That's how you get your dreams turned off. Be a high IQ football player. That means you're going to have to do something that, a lot of guys at a young age don't really care for, and that's study. Yeah, you got to study as a football player too. I'm hoping that this is something that you like. Since it's something that you like, which is football, you could find the time and the passion and the energy to study it, because you're going to need to, because that's what's going to separate the goods from the greats, the goods from the guys who just don't make it. So you're going to need a football IQ. The next thing, as we are learning more and more, positional versatility does boost your draft prospects. It's nice to be really great at one thing, And you get to do that if you are elite, if you are the top of the top. So if you're saying I'm just a corner and I'm just a press corner, you better be the best in all the world at that. You can't be the third or fourth or fifth or sixth best press corner and think that that's going to carry you. It's not like that anymore. You better be one or two, and I recommend you not be two if you're just going to be a specialist. Outside of that, being able to do multiple things is going to be a plus for you. Be able to press, be able to play off, be able to play on the outside, be able to play on the inside as well. Because, offenses have gotten good now. If you're a guy that can really eliminate a player out on the edge, they'll start putting that player that you want to eliminate in the slot. And if you can't cover in the slot, you won't be able to go in there. And now they will abuse whoever's in that slot. And then now you're just not as valuable as an outside player. If the team can just take their receiver and move him to the inside and you can't play in there, you're not that valuable. Be able to play safety in a pinch, right? Because if you do end up becoming a fringe player and you're not the number one guy, everyone wants to be the number one guy, but only one guy is going to be the number one guy. So if you end up not being that guy, the fact that you could slide in and play safety in a pinch is great. If you could come in and cover tight ends in addition to playing safety, great. That makes you more valuable to more teams. If you're valuable to more teams, more of a chance of you getting drafted, getting picked up earlier in a draft. All right. So be able to do multiple things. And that really comes from being good at number 2, which was having a football IQ. Number 4 is speed is good, but recovery speed is better. All right. Yes, told you guys to run track. You've got to be able to translate the track speed into football speed. And when we're talking about that as a defensive back, that is being able to accelerate quickly, being able to change direction. You can't just be a straight line runner who has to build up his speed and, you can't go from 0 to 60 really fast. Yes, you may be able to win 100-meter races when you're in track at the end, but you're rarely ever running 100 meters out on the football field. Okay, it's just never going to happen. There may be times where you need to get from 0 to 10 yards really, really fast. You've got to be able to come off that track in the spring and start translating the speed and strength that you developed on the track into football speed, which is quick accelerations, changes of direction. All right. And believe it or not, sometimes that change of direction isn't all physical. It's just because your eyes happen to be in the right spot so that you can react faster. You might be fast, but if your eyes are looking at a player's face, you're going to be late reacting to his body movement. So sometimes it's just a, focus thing. Take your eyes, put them in the right spot. Now you can translate that speed that you've built in the spring into something that works out on a football field. So get your football speed right. And then the final thing that I'm going to tell you is you have to be coachable. Sometimes in life, guys are really, really good as young football players and they get away with things. Sometimes your youth football player doesn't do you a service and he doesn't coach you as hard because he has an ego and he really wants you to show up on Saturday, show up in a good mood and be able to play and do what the team needs to do for him to win and be able to go on Facebook, which is what these coaches do now, or go on social media and say he's such a great coach, or he doesn't want you to leave his football team the next year. So because of that, he doesn't coach you hard. And years of that does not force you to be a coachable player. You just kind of get to do what you want, and you take that into high school, and maybe you're really still good in high school, and now your high school coach does the same thing, and you go to college, and the college coach just kind of molds his, way of coaching you into what you've already known, and you've never really been put to the test. When you get to that NFL, they're not dealing with that. They're not going to deal with it. So you're either coachable or not. And if you're not the top guy, if you've been able to get by for most of your life with not being a coachable player, a guy you can't really tell him anything, or you tell him stuff and he's not able to pick it up, you got to tell him 4, 5, 6, 7 times. No coach wants to do that. Every coach has limited time. A coach's indie period is never long enough. The entire practice time is not long enough. He doesn't get to meet with you enough. He doesn't get to do enough with you in the offseason. His time is limited. So when he's got to spend his time with one player saying stuff 4, 5, 6, 7 times, he's going to get annoyed by that player. And he might put up with it, but the moment someone else comes along that's good enough, he's done with you. He's done. He needs to be more efficient with his time, and efficiency in time is not repeating the same thing over and over to one player. So you got to be able to listen, and then you got to be able to listen, comprehend, and then execute. If you can do those things, you will have more value when your draft time comes along, and you're going to have all these meetings with all of these coaches, and they're going to talk to you. Now, going back to Shedeur Sanders, there's been reports out there that he didn't do well in meetings. He was a little cocky, might have come off as someone who can't be coached, whatever the case may be. I don't know how true that is, but it's thrown out there. And if they throw it out there, then we know that this is a thing. This is potentially a thing that coaches don't like, don't want to deal with. And they'll deal with it, again, if a player is the top guy. But if you're not that top guy, if you're the 3rd, 4th, 5th, 10th, 15th guy, they're not dealing with it. Now, if you're the 10th, 15th guy and you're super coachable, you'll get picked up. You'll get picked up. They want that kind of player on their team. If nothing else, they'll bring that player on the team to be an example to other guys as to how you need to act. And all you really want to do is just get in that building. If I'm in the building, I can get an opportunity because things happen once you get in that building. Player gets hurt, player gets cut, player leaves. I move up in the depth chart. I get an opportunity. I'm out on the field. Something happens. Lo and behold, here I am. I make the team. Now I'm a starter. Now I'm in a Pro Bowl. One day I get a gold jacket. Who knows? You just need an opportunity. And you're going to get that opportunity if you're coachable. You will slam the door on that opportunity if you're a guy that can't be told anything, can't comprehend anything, can't execute anything. All right? So those are the 5 things that I want you to think about. 5 areas that I want you to pay attention to as you hear these players that just got drafted talked about, as you hear them talk about players who didn't get drafted as future drafts come. Technique matters more than hype. You got to be a guy that has an IQ. You got to be able to, be versatile, be able to do multiple things. All right, not just be a one-trick pony. You got to have good recovery speed, change of direction, be able to work fast in a small area. And then the final thing is you've got to be coachable. All right, you've got to be able to take instruction and execute and provide results for that coach, for that team, for that organization, for that program. All right, that's the end of the Indy Drills podcast. Thank you guys for listening. Went a little long today. I hope I provided you with a good amount of nuggets. Before we leave, just once again, I want to talk to you about the 101 DB tips available in softback as well as ebook. If you order the ebook, it gets delivered to you right away. You can read it on your phone, your iPad, whatever medium you want to use digitally. You can look at it, or you can order the softback if you're old school. I will say this, the softback version does provide you with 100 passing terms that you need to know. That is a part of the softback. That's something you get in the softback version that you don't get in the ebook version, as well as a couple of pages in here that you could take some notes on. So me personally, call me old school, whatever. Softback, soft cover version of this is probably the way that you want to go. But again, if you want it now and you're a guy that more likes reading stuff on your phone or your iPad, order the ebook, comes to you right away. The link in the description down below. Then also the All Eyes DB Camp members area. Well over 200 posts in there on all types of things that you need. Technique. I've got a drill library in there. I post workouts in there for guys that are trying to, develop some workouts on their own, or for coaches or trainers out there who are trying to develop some kind of templates or some things that they would like to do to be able to better train their players. You have that in there, as well as, coverage is explained, quizzes in there. There's so much in there. I could probably do a whole nother Indy Drills podcast on the stuff that's in there. Just know that it's stuff that you need, that's going to make you better, that's going to improve your game, improve you as a coach, improve your unit. You will be better, guaranteed, if you are a member of the All Eyes DB Camp members area. So hit that link down in the description below. The football season is coming around the corner. Use your resources, get as much knowledge as possible. All right, that's it for me. I'm out of here until the next Indy Drills podcast. All Eyes DB Camp, consistency breeds results.